What's up, EXP? I'm Cameron Cisneros, your chair for the Pride Network, and I am so honored to close out Pride Month with someone whose leadership has not only shaped this company, but this industry. Leo Pareja is the CEO of EXP Realty, past national president of NARREP, founder of his own foundation, and one of the most powerful, impactful voices across the entire real estate industry today. But what makes this conversation so special is that we're not just talking about business. We're talking about legacy, identity, failure, resilience, and what it takes to lead with all of it on the table. So, Leo, thanks again so much for joining us here today. It truly means the world to me, and I'm excited to get into it.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting. Let's jump right in.
So I want to talk about building the bridge, specifically with the Maverick mindset, because you've said before, I didn't just get here by following the rules. So I want to start there. Can you share a moment where breaking the rules had led to your breakthrough and how that still guides you today?
I think the uncomfortable thing that most people don't realize is, your favorite stories, whether they're fictional or true, were not because they were average, right? So to experience or live an unusual life, you have to take risks, right? Average folks don't get movies made about them. Average experiences don't draw that allure that life creates. And so I think whether it's pushing yourself at sports as a kid, in the theater, in anything that puts you, it starts really young. And it's super top of mind because my kids are 8 and 10. And my daughter is doing singing at School of Rock, which, by the way, is way cooler than kind of the classical stuff I was put in as a kid. But she just did a rendition of Smells Like Teen Spirit. And it was the coolest thing to watch, right? Because it's that little breath she took on the video. And I mean, it was a packed local, it's normally a bar, but it was, family friendly on a Sunday. And it was all the participants' families. But like at 10 years old to push yourself like that is super cool. And then my son is obsessed with jujitsu, and he trains 6 days a week, and he's 8 years old, and he just competed in his third tournament, and he was crushing his division. And then the final, this kid is a beast. He trains like 6 hours a day. The other kid trains 6 hours a day, is homeschooled to compete.
What?
And my son, I said, hey, watch this match because you're going up against this little kid in the finals. And my son turned around, he goes, I don't want to do jiu-jitsu anymore. I'm done. And I sat down with him and I said, that's completely okay. Like, you can quit as soon as we're done with this fight, but you're fighting that kid. Like, you're here, and you owe it to him. Like, you can't just not let the kid have his last final match. It's in the finals. It's getting a pass is nowhere as fun. I said, but if at the end of the fight you want to quit and you never want to do jiu-jitsu again, that's completely cool. But you finish what you start. And he almost beat him. The kid went on to he was competing in multiple divisions that day, which that's what his life is designed for. Right. But my son almost beat him, and he got silver in his division. And afterwards, I actually sat him down. I was like, that moment, that fear, I want you to always remember that, because that's how you know you're growing. And that is the thing that drives opportunity, right? It's that uncomfortable feeling that creates all of the coolest experience I've ever had, right? It's on the other side of that paralyzing fear. And I've taught my kids, I'm like, look, did you die? Which is a crazy frame of reference,
right?
And when you realize that it didn't kill you, what's like, are we talking about embarrassment? Are we talking about pain? Are we like? I think we overcomplicate things, and it's like, what is it that's holding you back from making that choice or decision? And when I talk about entrepreneurship, this country is the greatest place on earth when it comes to what's at risk. You can start a company and you can fail epically. You can file bankruptcy. There are debtor's jail in other countries, and I don't think people comprehend that. Like, where if you borrow money and you don't pay back, they put you in jail till your family can buy you out of prison, right? And this country was built on risk taking and the allure of that, going against the grain persona. And so, the super long-winded answer for, I feel like all of the coolest experiences I've had in life are on the other side of being uncomfortable. And, I've been unconventional kind of my entire time, right? I started selling real estate in college. That was really weird.
Right.
When I'd show up to the office, people said, "You are my grandson's age," right? Not my son, it was my grandson's age. And then it was like, you're not qualified to be the managing broker. You're not qualified to start a team. You're not qualified to do anything that I've ever done. And so every part of my journey has been what you just said, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
why was I qualified to run a publicly traded company? I've never done it before, right?
Yeah. 100%.
And there's this, I was having a conversation one-on-one with an agent, and I said this, and it's a frame of reference. I think we self-actualize as who we think we are somewhere between 14 and 16 years old. Like, we kind of figure out who we are in our identity. And the crazy reference point is to just remember and remind others that at any given point, we're all just a bunch of like 16-year-olds pretending to be grown-ups and being responsible. When you can remember that, on the other side of whoever is you're negotiating with, or like when I sit across from analysts, or I sit across from, other CEOs, they're the same. We're all just pretending to have it all figured out, doing the best we can in a flawed experience with all of our own personal stuff going on in the background, and just kind of doing the best we can. And as shocking of that sentence I asked my kids, like, did you die? There's another crazy frame of reference when we think that nobody gets out alive. And in 100 years, everyone you will have known will no longer be here. And it wasn't that serious. So just kind of enjoy the ride.
That's so true. And I relate to a lot of what you've said, and even your story, because you were 20 years old when your fame of claim was when you bought your first property at 20. And you jumped into this really early on in your adult life. And I was 21 years old. I was 22 when I bought my first house. And a lot of times, like, on the other side of that paralyzing fear is what I hear from other people is that they're afraid to, like, they think they're going to lose something. I'm like, well, you never had it in the first place. You have nothing to lose. So you have to go after it, because a lot of times every failure is the equal seed to a greater opportunity. And it's what you take from it that you can carry forward that's going to help character development and help you navigate those bigger problems. Because as you get older, the complexity of problems elevate. The problems don't go away, right?
Well, and again, like, I think we are all in different seasons of our life, and the one that's super top of mind to me is being a dad. And like, when you watch a toddler learn to walk, like, they fall a lot. Like,
yeah,
they don't fall on their little butts and go, you know what, I'm done with this walking thing. It's like and that's how life is. And so I think at some point we lose, sight of that and kind of forget that it's like, that's the whole point, right?
No.
And a mental frame that, again, I locked in probably at 16 when I learned to drive stick shift, was a super conscious moment where I'm like, hey, this is something I don't understand, or it feels clunky. But I remember thinking, I'm like, there will come a moment where this comes second nature. And, as a 16-year-old, I had a souped up car that I probably shouldn't have been driving that fast. But like 6, 12, 18 months later, it just kind of like, you could do it unconsciously. And that thought process is something that I've actually gotten to treasure, right? Whether it's, scuba diving or spearfishing, or even like doing my first earnings call versus like the 12th one, right? Where all of a sudden it's like, it's old hat. And I just, like, I can almost telegraph what's going to come next because I've seen it before. And that's where telegraphing comes from. And for the folks that might not know what word I'm using, it's from sports. It's like, whether it's the backswing of a tennis racket, or a golf swing, or, a counterpunch in martial arts, like, you can see the shoulder movement of your opponent and know what they're going to do because you've seen every variation of it at a certain point. And that normally comes from mastery, right? And so in sales, it's like, if you follow Tom Hopkins, which is probably the greatest sales trainer of all time, which, by the way, we own all the materials through Success Enterprises. I think he said there's 43 total objections in real estate, right? And again, if you've qualified them, if you've actually answered ready, willing, and able, right? If you answer the questions, there's only like an X number of variable objections. And that's the difference between someone winging it versus someone who's masterful, and they just have every answer. And it's not coercion. It's understanding the value, the problem you're trying to solve. And so whether it's business, or it's life, or it's sports, or it's whatever, part of life is in front of you, That's how I approach things.
Absolutely. I say the same thing. Every time I do like a speaking engagement, I always tell people that their success is directly proportional to their ability to problem solve, impact, cultivate relationships, and to continuously propel them forward, regardless of your industry, because we're all in sales, whether we recognize it or not.
100%.
Yeah. So I want to talk about, from agent to architect. At 28 years old, you had became Keller Williams' #1 agent, and then you co-founded Washington Capital Partners and Remine. You've also been featured on Real Trends 1000 list, NAREP Top 250, Realtors Magazine 30 Under 30. Looking back at all of those things, which leap felt the scariest from you, and what did it teach you about yourself?
So I think every time I've put myself out there, it should be scary, right? Like I think the concept of imposter syndrome is super fascinating because I heard a quote recently that explained it differently, and it's what my son just experienced, and I had just heard the quote, so I was able to really lock in and kind of walk him through that. I said, the feeling of fear in the moment is courage. And he's 8 years old and he's like having a meltdown on the side of the mat. And I'm like, no, my guy, you got to lock in right now. And I said, this feeling that you feel in the pit of your stomach, I said, hold on to it. And I want you to be able to recall it at a later date, because courage actually doesn't feel like courage. It's actually that fear, right? Like last summer when I decided we were going to do broker to broker compensation, like no one's ever done that. Right. And I was like, hey, I'm just going to change the policy in 50 states at one time. And I kind of felt like the whipping boy of the industry for about 2 weeks. And like 2 weeks in, it was really loud.
Yeah.
And I was like having trouble sleeping. And I remember I rolled over and my wife's like, well, what's going on? You met Ariana. And she said, are you right? And I said, I don't think I've been more right in my head about anything before. She goes, then see it through. Right. And so, and so, making decisions that are tough, like from the outside, it's like, oh, they have it all figured out. No, they don't. Right. It's sticking to it. And then also like life's a journey, right? Like the other thing I say all the time is like, look, I have no problem changing my mind and apologizing if I feel like I made a mistake.
Right.
There are no hills to die on if it's not like existential or necessary if you found out you made a mistake either.
Yeah, 100%. And with that too, you have worn so many hats throughout your career. You've had many #1 titles, from agent, company, chapter, dad. Out of all of those titles, which one shifted your internal narrative the most, and not just your resume?
No, it's always that. I see life as before kids and after kids. And by the way, like they're folks like my brother doesn't want kids. And what's crazy is I was clear at 6 years old, I wanted to be a dad. Like that was my life's goal.
Really?
And my brother, who's like 4.5, was like, yeah, I'm never going to have kids. And he's the coolest fun uncle on the planet. And so first of all, like your journey is your journey. So like, I don't push my thoughts onto anybody. For me, that's the coolest title I've ever had because I always wanted it. And I was super clear that I was like, I'm going to work really hard and I'm going to create an unusual life. And then I want to be all in with my kids. And one of the reasons I'm so loud about family first is because I think it creates the boundaries and the framework that allows me to prioritize my family. Like if you know me, if you've interacted with me, you know that that's my priority. And so when I'm not available on an evening or a weekend to talk, it's not because I'm being difficult or I'm being unavailable. It's because I've already shared with you guys my priorities. The flip side of that is I feel like I'm probably more engaged and all in on the times I make myself available, right? Like how I show up, the intensity, the focus. I'm locked in right here with you. I don't have text messages in the background. I don't have, Slack or workplace in the back. Like, right. And I wake up early and I work out and I drink my water and I stay hydrated and I try, I don't eat stuff that slows me down or puts me to sleep, or I fast normally till the end of the day. So I'm locked in because my commitment is to over deliver so I can then show up for my family how I need to. And so one is understand the chapter you're in and the journey, right? Like all those accolades that you said were obsessions I had from like the time I was 20. I was like, I want all of those. And it was a season. It was a decade of 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I'm not exaggerating, right?
Yeah.
And with that came a time compression, right? I took what takes 20 or 30 years into 10. And there was a price, and the price was my health. And I'd get like, at one point I got strep throat 5 times in one single year. I had to get my tonsils removed. And it was like 2-3 times a year I had to have antibiotics for pneumonia, cold, whatever, which translate, like I haven't had a cold in 6 years, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't sleeping enough. I wasn't prioritizing the things I prioritize. Like my flex now is that I average 7.4 hours of sleep per night, right? And like and when you start tracking certain things, whether it's leads to conversions or how many hours you sleep, you notice like, oh, if I eat late or I have a glass of wine, it affects my sleep, right? And again, no judgment, like what's more important? What's the priority in this season of life I'm in? And like, do I have to work in the morning, or it's like, I'm in the south of France with Ariana. That's a different kind of decision tree. And so you just need to, and those decisions I made in that journey had a cost, which, by the way, I'm okay with. I knew what I was doing in the sense of the prioritizations. To quote Dave Ramsey, I lived like nobody else, so I could live like nobody else for the rest of my life. And
right.
And one of the things of the seasons in that first season of life, what you have is time and energy. And so like what I can now do in 4 to 6 hours, right, with the experience and, the word wisdom comes to mind. I don't want to sound at all arrogant about it. It's just, I have 23 years to recall on of experiences in decision making, right?
Yeah.
So my output in probably 2 hours a day now exceeds what I could do at 12 hours a day at 22, right? And the impact I can have, right? So whether it's for myself or the company, I always encourage everybody to think of ROI on time, right? Like I have a yes policy for this stuff. Like what we're doing right now falls under the one to many, right? So if we were to take my calendar and I show it to you guys, and you've heard me probably say this on stages, 50 to 70% of my days are one-to-one to one-to-many with agents, right? And I don't think there's a correct right or wrong how to be a CEO either, by the way. I've been CEOs of different businesses in different industries, and I'm friends with CEOs of different industries. And it depends as to what your skills are, what your God-given talents are, right? Like I have technical friends who write code and are CEOs. And then I have friends who are phenomenal operators. And I am a salesperson, growth person.
Yeah.
We're all CEOs, but we all have different God-given talents. And what you do is then you surround yourself with people who have those skills, right? Like Wendy is a force of nature as a CMO, which really overlaps into any other role that she touches. And, Patrick O'Neill, who's more in the background, our CEO is just amazing as a human being and as an operator. And like, if you ever talk to him about KPIs and NPS scores, I don't think you'd ever get someone so excited about data.
100%. Yeah, we did talk about them. We were in Austin together.
And so, I think the key to building leadership teams is to actually find folks who complement you in the sense of what skill sets you may have deficiencies at.
100%. You touched on a lot of great things. And one of them hits home for me about the health and prioritization, because I'm 25 now. And before I came to you guys at EXP, I was in the Army for 3.5 years. And I thought that I was basically invincible. I would down pre-workout, drown it with a Red Bull, go to the gym, jump into real estate. I felt like I had nothing else to lose. So I didn't have balance, but nor did I respect my body as the temple that it is. And at 25, I think it's catching up to me a little bit more. Like as we currently speak, I'm scheduling an appointment to go to a heart doctor to make sure that like I am in check right now, because I've lived through such a period of imbalance, not making sure that I'm staying regulated so I can continue to show up as my fullest self. And like you had said, leaning into your God-given abilities and talents, like for me, it's impact, it's connecting with people. I am horrible at Canva. and I'm horrible behind the scenes, but I have friends that I'm able to delegate that to so that my time is most effectively used doing what I love most. Because I think a lot of times agents, and myself included, have struggled working too much in their business instead of on their business. And then it's just this violent up and down, where it should be more, if we can tread upwards. But if you're not continuously working on the things that got you the business, you're going to be here and then there and up and down, and it can be pretty violent. But I'm really glad that you touched on that. And it leads me into talking more about that impact, because it's clear that your story isn't just about success. It's about building impact. And for years, you have poured into building pathways for others. So when we talk about, as founding member for the DC Metro president and then later national president for NAREP, what's a moment that made you realize that this is all bigger than real estate, that it's truly a legacy?
So obviously being Latino is very real to me and part of my identity and culture. So a couple things that I think are important to say. I think where Gary Acosta, the founder of NAREP, did an incredible job was not taking the advocacy is not the word I'm thinking about, but the more traditional former kind of advocacy group stance, which was, demanding a seat at the table because of X, right? Like, and I would probably mention like Council La Raza and a couple of other organizations that were, pretty hardcore grassroots advocacy groups. And he actually positioned NAREP as a trade group, and the conversation around the organization and the group was always about economic empowerment opportunity, right? When it comes to having a diverse leadership team, having a diverse workforce, it's about having a group of folks who are reflective of the greater country, who you serve, right? Any group that's completely monolithic will have a lack of vantage point of opinion, period. Gender, race, anything, right? And so if you have a group of folks working together that have a diverse point of view from age to everything, you end up having a better economic team to capture market share, right? When you think of, I think, again, you asked me about NAREP and I was very involved. That's where I saw a kind of light bulb moment where it wasn't like, hey, I deserve a seat at the table because we exist, versus like, hey, did you know that we're going to drive every decision on every election for the next 50 years? Did you know that household formation is happening at disproportionate rates here? Did you know that the birth to death ratio is X? Did you know that Latino buyers control, trillions of dollars of economic power, and it's probably the 5th largest economy in the world? Did you know? That is a very different comment. And again, fill in the blank, right? For any group. And when something's positioned, so one thing I will say is human beings never lay in bed at night worrying if you have enough to eat, not because they don't love and care about you. It's because they're laying in bed enough worrying about feeding themselves and their offspring, right? So forget meaning and applying a lot of like shoulds in there, and just understand that human beings are making selfish choices at all times. And selfish is a loaded word, but it goes back to like the evolutionary brain we have, right? Like this species of Homo sapien that is here is because it's anxious and paranoid, right? And that with like the saber-toothed tigers didn't eat us because parts of our tribe stayed up at night and the others slept. And like there's all kinds of crazy stuff when you think of biology. And when you realize that little voice inside of your head that keeps you up at night of like making sure you can feed yourself and your tribe, and then just take that biological understanding and approach all interactions of what can I do for you? And like right off the bat, either ask probing questions to understand what it is you want. Because I think too many people show up to an interaction, and again, sales, personal, business, however you want to couch it, and go into blah and sell someone, versus ask probing questions and genuine probing questions, not a tactic.
Right.
And then most human beings will tell you exactly what it is they want to hear about or learn about. And then all of a sudden you can spend 30 minutes or an hour or however is allotted answering their questions in a very consistent theme and thesis I have is that I value time above everything on the planet, right? Because it's finite and it expires. And so if I can actually spend the 30 minutes or the 40 minutes or the hour with someone answering the questions that are top of mind, they're going to walk away feeling that was an actually impactful conversation, right? Because so many of us, and put yourself in that place, is how many times have you been in a conversation where it's like, can we just get to it? Like, I don't need the preamble. And again, for the team side, like the staff side of it, I think at the beginning I was probably perceived as probably abrasive because I'm like, yeah, let's get to the point, right? We have limited, like if we have a 30-minute call and you spend 10 minutes giving me a preamble, we just wasted 10 minutes, right? Like,
right.
Can we get to the ask? Can we get to the numbers? And, I had a call earlier today with Sumant and a couple of folks, and it was funny because they said something and I asked a question and Sumant just cracked a smile, and the team member was prepared for that question because Sumant goes, that's how Leo's brain works. Like, don't even give me a statement without the context of the data. And just as you build your career and your experiences, also learn who you work with and how you interact with them and what makes them tick. And that's why I'm a big fan of, DISC profiles or Myers-Briggs or anything that can give you insight to who you're dealing with and how they are wired.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Absolutely. You touched on a lot of great key points there too. And even with NAREP here in Oklahoma, it just as of 2024, it took me a few years, but we finally successfully implemented Spanish contracts in the state of Oklahoma. And I've been able to branch that out into New Mexico because one of the biggest things is that 65% of our demographic is Hispanic, and 95% of the 65% speak English as a second language. That is an entire generation of homeowners in the next decade that at the very least deserve a contract form in their own native language.
And I think that's a good example of localizing it to your submarket, right?
Yeah.
Like, for example, I'm a millennial and I'm first generation because I didn't move here till I was 12, but I'm fully bilingual and I feel like my English and my Spanish are almost identical, other than I just feel more comfortable in English for legal stuff, right? So, it's not one size fits all. And I think that approach goes to just about any group you're talking about on the planet, right? It's, if you were to market to me in Spanish only, you're actually going to lose me, right? And so, it's about the optionality and meeting people where they're at, which I think is important.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I want to talk about the Pareja Family Foundation. You have co-founded this amazing foundation, which funds tech boot camps for women and minorities. What's a story from that work that still stays with you today?
Yeah. And what we've focused on since we've relocated to Florida is we created a financial literacy program that we do with Miami-Dade College, and we give it away for free. And what I'll say, what Ariana and I learned, because we met when we were really young, was most people don't choose to do things of impact because they don't think they're ready. Kind of like most things we talked about earlier, right? So I had a big realization with that during the financial crisis, because just like I knew I was going to be a dad, I always knew I wanted to give back. My father ran NGOs my whole childhood, and I saw him do amazing things around the world. And so I always said, when I have enough money, then I will do X, right? And during the financial crisis, running up to it, I was doing very, very well. And then all of a sudden it all disappeared. Mm-hmm. And I had an aha moment of like, tomorrow doesn't exist as a construct. There's only the now, in the most real sense as possible. And so Ariana and I both became big brothers, big sisters. And we found out on like our second date that we had both applied. And that's actually, I tell her, like, that's the moment I was like, okay, this is my human.
Right.
And what we both learned from that experience is that I think you can give time at any moment. And right. And then I think that, taking it back to business, I think at the beginning we just have time. So, prospect. And then when you have some money, then you can buy leads, and then it's lead gen. Right. But it goes with giving too, right? If all you have at the beginning is time, then give time. And I just fully believe in a concentrated effort of giving. So instead of writing, a $50 check once a month, it's like, okay, why don't you pick a kid or a human to pour into? And I think that's where we overcomplicate. It's like, well, how? Well, you have something unique that makes you special, that more than most. And there's probably somebody who wants that. and just giving them time. So like, some of the folks we put through the boot camp where, someone making $40,000 a year was able to upskill and make $120,000, become homeowners and like really change their kids' trajectory has been amazing. But, since I was young, I've done well, and I felt a obligation to pass along the blessings.
Yeah, absolutely. And that it's really incredible the things that you guys do. Y'all are such a powerhouse couple. I truly admire the both of you and the work that you do. What is the most rewarding, but hardest lesson that you've learned in leadership and life working together as a partnership?
Yeah, so we started and scaled all of our businesses together, and I think the one lesson that we learned was you got to be able to like cut off the work part and have your personal part as well, because we could pillow talk till 2 a.m. about the same anxiety. And so if you don't kind of draw the line and say, hey, once we get to this time or this part of the evening, we're just going to cut it off, right?
Yeah.
And so and by the way, I think partnerships with your partner are the best ones on the planet, right? And so I highly encourage it. I know it's not for everybody, but we've done it our whole lives together. So I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah, and it's truly incredible because when two great minds come together in unison to achieve a definite aim, you see the amount of impact that you can scale together. So I want to talk about the space that you're shaping, not just the communities that you serve, but the industry that you're leading. In recent interviews, I've heard you offer some unfiltered takes on broken real estate models. What's one myth or assumption that you want to blow up today that few dare to challenge?
There's a bunch.
I know, right?
I speak on that subject a lot. Look, first of all, we're going through a huge shift in technology again, right? This will be the third one I've lived through. The first one was high-speed internet. The second one was mobile. The part that I'm most excited and most scared about is kind of the AI shift, but the part that I'm excited about is the democratization of it, right? There is no real gatekeepers this time around.
Yeah.
If you have not vibe code yet, you will, and so will everybody else.
Yeah.
Right. I think we're 3 years away from almost everyone having a uniquely personal tech experience, right? So I think, and again, this will get esoteric and out there, but it's what's top of mind. So that's what you get today. I think companies like ours will, 3 to 5 years from now, be a proprietary set of data, right? And in technical speak, a data lake with APIs that attach to a very personalized interaction that you prefer. And it'll be different than most B2B enterprise SaaS experiences we had thus far. And, it'll all look like this, right? Where you're having a conversation with a robot, whether verbal or written. And it's, the difference is this going out to like the broader ecosystem of data, or is it a isolated, proprietary, but like, I just think, you guys will be saying, hey, Siri, or fill in your favorite robot's name. And I want to open a file on 123 Main Street, and here's a PDF. And like, you won't interact with UI the way you do today. And again, like for anyone listening to this, they're probably resonating in the sense like, you're no longer going to Google. You're no longer going to log in through portals. It's like, I just talk to this thing and it gives me context and data together, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I said 10 years ago, I said, data is the new oil, and I built an entire company around it. Data is no longer the new oil. I think attention is the new oil. And it's been for a while. And so now my closing thought is, I think we're about to live through a commodization of all forms of communication, written, verbal, and video, and digital, right? So video, voice, and written, because we now have robots that kind of take everything and make it very polished and beautiful. And so what's going to happen is we all become numb to it. And so my bet is over the next 3 to 5 years, as robots, virtual and or physical, start being part of our normal world, I think there's going to be a premium on human experiences. So like this that you and I are doing together is very human, and by the way, not going anywhere, right? And the best proof point that I have for that is post-COVID, right? Like there was a moment during COVID where we're like, okay, in person's dead. Like we're all going to do these virtual things. And the answer is we ran back to being tribal as soon as possible.
Right.
And the energy that I get from being with you guys in in-person events is unreplicatable in the digital form. And by the way, I don't think it'll ever change. And so when it comes to serving people, I think the companies that leverage everything I just rambled about, coupled with delivering a real human experience, that's the future.
Oh, absolutely. I want to end this with a powerful closing question. We've talked about it before. You've lived through multiple versions of the American dream: immigration success, agent domination, tech founder, CEO, community builder. If every single one of those titles were stripped away tomorrow, what's one thing you want the agents to take away, especially those who feel overlooked, to carry forward with them for years to come?
I think that's a good one. And I think that question is answered on different seasons, right? Like in my 20s, all I wanted was titles, and like it kept me up at night, and I made decisions on vanity metrics because I wanted certain titles. And the aha moment I had was when I was 28 and I became #1 in the world, 30 under 30, all at the same time. And it was the most empty and meaningless feeling of my life, because I was expecting to feel different. And I woke up and it was actually a disappointment. And so the closing thought is that it's progress over destination, right? Like there is no arriving moment. It's just, again, time is a construct, and like you only have the now. And so prioritize what's really important. And, again, wisdom versus just being smart. It's health.
Yeah.
It's the people I care about, right? Like fast forward to the end of the movie and you're taking your last breath. Who's around you? Right? Like you won't give a shit about titles, and
that's right.
You won't. It's like, I hope it's my bloodline, and they're excited to be there and saying goodbye. That's
awesome. And seriously, it's powerful. And I really do appreciate you meeting with us here today, not just as a CEO, but as a builder, as a bold voice, but most importantly, as a human. You remind us that leadership isn't about titles. It's about courage. It's about choosing purpose over comfort, impact over ego, and community over competition. And as we close out Pride Month, this conversation is the perfect reminder that our power doesn't come from fitting in. It comes from showing up relentlessly, unapologetically together. And so to everyone listening here today, you don't need permission to lead. You don't need the approval to take up space. You just need your story and the guts to own it. Because the future of this industry, it doesn't belong to the loudest. It belongs to the realest ones. And everybody who is listening here today knows that I say that authenticity is the highest form of currency that you will ever be able to give. And there is not a single carbon blueprint that will ever be able to replicate the light and value that you bring and that you serve to your communities. So Leo, again, thank you so much for being one of them. And thank you all for joining us here and for an incredible Pride Month. Thank you for tuning into our Pride Month programming to 20,000 members, and stay tuned for the next month's events.